and our topic is From Awareness to Transformation, the necessity of leaders and institutions to embody moral courage for racial conciliation. So you're going to get to know a little bit more about us, but first we'd like to know a little bit more about you. So if you could state your name, your position in your department, how long you've been at APU, and then about a sentence or less, really quick, what were your initial thoughts when you saw the presentation topic today? So we're going to start over here and we'll circle around.
So my name is Sarah Rojas. I work for Senator Crane Colleague and Office of Alumni Engagement, so I work in both offices. I've been here for, it's going to be almost a year, this month. And the topic itself, I mean, everything, I'm one of the ambassadors, but everything has been a huge interest, especially today, how people are suffering. And I just want to be a better advocate to people. And so I'm just taking everything in as we're studying and how can I serve my community better.
Excellent. My name is Johnny Gibson. I'm an assistant registrar with the Graduate Registrar's Office. I've been with you for 3 years. I've been on parent role for about a year and a half. Excited to be part of the Diversity Ambassador Group. First seeing this topic, just really speaking about what it takes to go from knowing about an issue and wanting to be involved and actually stepping out, especially with the idea of racial reconciliation.
My name is Laurie. I am a private project manager in IU. I've been with APU for 3 years now. I just think that we need to not be afraid and be willing to be vessels used for purpose of narrowing the gaps that some of us may experience here. I think it takes courage, and that I'm hoping to gather more tools to be
Okay, Andrew Barton, Chief of Staff here, so I work in with the President, and I've been here 10.5 years. I think what caught my attention was just the reference to leaders and institutions, just in terms of my positional influence. I think it's important that I continue to educate myself. And then the racial, I've heard of racial reconciliation, and I was just interested in racial conciliation, so that's one.
I'm Luigi Guerra. I work for the Executive Vice President. I've been here 5.5 years. And little what Anne was saying, well, immigration paperwork, and along with that usually comes issues of race. And but again, had heard reconciliation as opposed to conciliation. So you're right.
Becca Martin, I'm in academic service learning, and I've been in that position about 6 months, but I've been a long time. And my initial thoughts, I'm interested to see what institutes moral courage attributes or characteristics of that.
Michelle Johnson, Executive Director of Graduate Professionals through Financial Services and Registrar here at APU. I've been here about 11 years. And what was interesting to me was the conversation around myself being a leader and then the necessity of leaders. And so to embody that courage and so on.
I'm Audrey Yo. I'm Director of Foundation Relations. I've been here, so with the University of Exeter. I've been here my 7th year. And what my interest was the awareness of transformation in that.
Hey everyone, Stephanie Juliet, Associate Provost for Institutional Effectiveness. I've been here 18 years, and I want moral courage.
Well, that's the back.
My name is Kate Brown. I'm in the Department of Biology and Chemistry. I'm a laboratory technician. I've been employed at APU for about 2.5 years now. And my initial thoughts on how long is the necessity of leaders and institutions, which kind of seems like the bare minimum that you would have to do some fair sense of what those necessities are.
Suzanne Avila, and I work in the Office of Research and Grants. I've been in that position for 5.5 years. And what interests me about the topic was its timing. And not timely just here on the APU campus, but timely in the Azusa community.
And I'm Elizabeth Munguia. I've been here for about almost a year, and I work as a lab technician at the Biology and Chemistry Department. And I was looking at the title, and I didn't know what racial reconciliation is. So I know what racial reconciliation is, as he mentioned before. And I've also seen like the growing necessity of just everyone really just having, as it says, like that moral courage to just step up and speak up and things like that.
My name is Mona Gerkes. I've been at APU for 17 years and worked for a position in university libraries for about 6 months. And I'm here to learn more about moral courage.
And I'm Terry Franks, and I work in student financial services and professional, and same thing, moral courage.
I'm Charlene Janice. I work in graduate professional admissions. And I've been at APU as a staff for about 1.5 years, but I started as a student in 2010. And same thing with everyone else, my initial thoughts were on that moral courage piece.
Good morning, my name is Ellen Chinazu Lee from University Libraries, and I've been at APU for 14 years. And I work as a librarian, a curator, and head of library community relations. The thing that I see here that is extremely important is the word necessity. That it is necessary for leaders, first of all, and before institutions to embody moral courage and reconciliation. That comes first. They need to recognize, leaders need to recognize first, and then these institutions will recognize how to embody moral courage and reconciliation.
Hi, my name is Leah Klingseis. I am the Director for International Enrollment here at APU. I've been here about 11 years. I would say I'm interested in the subject in part because of personal responsibility and what it means to apply and to truly embody that, not just in my work with a staff as a leader, but also in my work with students.
My name is Jenny Reeve. I work in the School of Nursing, and I came here because I've actually been talking to my daughter about this, how to deal with racial issues at her school and having moral courage to speak up. So it came from kind of a parenting perspective.
Eduardo Irizarry, Center for Student Actions, Mexico Outreach. I'm the Events of Operation and Recruitment Coordinator. And I just saw who was speaking, so I didn't really read what they were talking about.
Hi, my name is Deanna Houston. I work in the School of Theology. I'm the department coordinator for the departments of theology and for the departments of philosophy. I have been a graduate student twice at APU, so since 2007 maybe was when I started my first grad program in education, and then I did a Master of Divinity. And now I work here. My thoughts were, as a Black person, I see a great lack of moral courage. I sense a necessity, have sensed it lifelong, and I would like to see it implemented. And that is why I'm here, because I would like to not only, I would like to be a part of it in the most productive way possible.
I'm Marie Pacino, Chair of Library Information Study. I've been at APU 25 years. I think I'm the one who's been here the longest. Anyway, and I really think it's important for people in positions of leadership to model moral courage, because it's not easy to do. It can be difficult, but it's really important to just express throughout the organization, speaking out when you see situations that are unjust.
My name is Ossie Elder, and I'm a program coordinator in the Central Way office.
I've been in that role for about a year and a half now, but I started as a student in 2012, so I've been here for about 5.5 years. I think it's important for institutions to model moral courage for their students, and I think our students have realized the necessity of this, but it's important for us as leaders to also model that for our students. And also what they were saying about, I've heard of reconciliation, but I'm interested in regional reconciliation.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Jacks, and I'm the office manager for the Department of University Relations. I've been in that position for about a year and a half, with AP a little over 2 years. And just being in university relations, I work with almost all the departments in the university. Just wanted to be a part of, again, awareness to transformation, and to just continue to grow and learn. That's all I'm doing.
My name is Ida Stewart. I work in the advancement department. I'm the assistant director of foundation relations. I've been here about 6 months. And I think this topic is interesting to me because I think for change to happen, it both is sort of a grassroots and top-down meeting together. And so I think for the sake of racial reconciliation and moral courage, you need both of those forces in collaboration, and that's what I'm interested in.
My name is Brianna Brown. I work in the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Assessment. I've been here a little over a year, and what stood out to me was just the concept of moral courage and the transition and the process to that point in an environment where it's lacking.
I'm Allison Smith. I'm program coordinator in the Center for Global Learning and Engagement. I've been at AP on staff for a little less than a year and a half, and I was an undergrad student here as well. And I do interested in this moral courage and how that can be applied in that.
Hi, my name is David Harris. I work in the Department of Research. Department of University Relations. I've been here 8 years. And what interests me about this topic is we've been doing diversity ambassador training in office. So it's actually that little paragraph that came after the title when we look at the action or inaction on behalf of different people, institutions in the face of racial reconciliation and justice. And so I don't want to do my part, I guess. I don't see APU as an institution separate from my role in it. I recognize it's made up of all of us, and so I have a role to play in making things better, and I want to do that. So.
My name is Fred Wood, and I'm a faculty member for the School of Nursing and site director for the Monrovia campus. And I teach bioethics, and one of the things that we just looked at in class yesterday was, the tragedy of the syphilis experiments for the community of Tuskegee, which went on for remarkably 40 years, many years after penicillin was discovered and could have been implemented. So how we act in groups and how we can sometimes make terrible decisions, in a group context. This is something that I've always been interested in. I've been involved in a lot of racial reconciliation efforts, and I don't know if reconciliation is similar to the need for rehabilitation before we have rehabilitation, but I'm looking forward to finding that.
Great, well, it's wonderful getting to know all of you. You'll get to know me a little bit better. AP is actually our alma mater. We are college sweethearts. And actually, met on Truber Watt. I was leaving and graduated in 2012. I taught in urban public schools starting in Compton. And then I got married and we moved to Pasadena. And I taught there for 14 years. Really working with parents, helping them to become advocates. I did a lot of work with Latina mothers and first generation, and helping them to understand the education system, helping them to get resources, insurance, healthcare, and really helping them to understand this journey that their children are on. Because every parent really wants what's best for their kid, but they're not always sure how to do that. I've also transitioned out of the public school, and I'm going into higher education, which I'm very excited about. I serve as a faculty advisor at Life Pacific College, which is very close working with master's level students. I grew up on the east side of LA. And one of the things that we've done for years is Gabe's invited his students over. He'll talk to you a little bit more. He's taught at a lot of institutions, APU included. My master's level students from Life Pacific, and we'll bring them over to our home. Our current students, former students, people that we've mentored for years, people we just started mentoring, to really show them community, the kingdom of God, and helping them to understand that this theory that we're going to delve into goes beyond the classroom, that there's efforts outside that need to be made to keep that collaboration, to keep that community really going and thriving. So here you can see we have two of our students. The gentleman, he's actually a master's level student right now at APU, and his wife did her master's in global leadership, and I currently mentor her, and he currently mentors her husband, and they're actually sharing with some freshman students from APU, and really helping them to understand, in all of our classes we put a service learning component, and really helping them to understand from someone who's a little further along in the journey, what does that look like, what was their experience as these freshmen who just had their very first course, are just becoming aware of college and what this journey looks like. We also bring in other professors, so the gentleman here is a fellow professor. We also bring in family members, so this is Gabe's dad. He is an educator in LA Unified for 30 years. So really helping the students to learn information in a really intimate setting. So we'll do a presentation for them and having that ability to do questions and answers, but in a real familial style. We'll bring in not just one institution, so it won't just be all APU students. We'll bring APU students, LMU students, USC students, master's level freshmen, and really helping them to understand the body of Christ. Really understand that we're all on this journey together. Some are a little bit further along than others, but we're all here to help and strengthen each other. We bring in a little Mexican hospitality. So this is rice pudding and really helping them to understand the community that they're in. We have class leaders in all of our classes where students will work with us one-on-one, helping to garner their skills and their talents, and we involve them in the process. So here they're actually making the rice pudding that has been in our family for years. And they're really getting in there, becoming really close friends. Because oftentimes students come in from all parts of the world and they feel in isolation. And in here, we really get them to understand that we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, we're all learning, we're all growing. We also bring in an American side, so we do s'mores, and the kids really love this. They've gotten really creative with their toppings and their styles to make it, and really helping students. They may be in the same class, but maybe they go on Mondays and some of the other kids go on Wednesdays, so they don't really know each other. And really helping them to build a bond so they can have study groups and really get to know that, they're in this together. We also make it fun for them, so we'll have like a photo booth. The millennials are really into photos, Instagram. We have also brought in tapestries. So here's Bill Murray, which the 18-years are not very informed about. They thought he was Robin Williams. And so helping them, to have fun in life. That, academics goes beyond the classroom, that you can still find joy and have fun. So we really bring them all together, help them to know, you're in this community, we're all here together. You don't have to just be with your class, there's other kids taking the same courses that you can get to know. So with this service learning component, we always ask, how many students have done community service as a freshman in high school? Everybody will raise their hand. How many did it as a sophomore? Everyone raises their hand. Junior, senior, the same. They're all padding up their resumes for college and doing all this service because, they want to get into a great school, which is wonderful. And then we always ask, do you still have any relationship with anyone you have served over those past 4 years? And it's so saddening to hear that it's no one raising their hand. So they're going into these service learning, which is primarily like after-school tutoring programs with brown and black children. But yet, once their time is done, it's done. So we really want to encourage them to continue relationships, understand service learning is fun, because that's the same thing Gabe and I experienced. growing up in a low-income neighborhood, being Mexican American, having all these volunteers come in and serving, and then they just leave. And so we don't want to create that cycle of abandonment where we just do it, it's a one and done, but to really build that community and realize that they're in this community. Those are your brothers and sisters in Christ. We really want to all help everybody to grow. And we also want them to understand that service learning isn't something you just check off a list. You don't just go do the service like, oh, I'm dreading it, but something that can be fun. And so I always try to encourage them, have fun, find joy, and serving others. So here is our little dog, Reese's, who brings joy to all the students. And he's a really little hospitality host. And it's really sweet because the kids here, a lot of them are from out of state. They're away from home for the first time. And their little furry friends at home, they had to leave behind. So we've encouraged them to, spend that time. They find that comfort to have a little furry family member that we're sharing with them. So we just want to encourage all of you, to really share with your students your life. Oftentimes we're so much about theory, or so much about pushing content, that we forget that it really spills out outside of the classroom. Really, life happens everywhere. And really helping to share your family, share your friends, share your little furry family members, and really open up, because that really starts to show students, who you are. As they see you lead, then they start to understand, well, what does that moral authority look like? Oh, that is what I can strive to be like. We're going to go a little bit deeper. So before we go there, does anybody have any questions or any clarification before I go on?
When I come to a place like APU, you can't even summarize my experiences here because it goes so long. Whether it was when I was a kid growing up in La Fuente, my mom wanted to put me in youth group, and I came and the youth group was actually hosted at APU. And we saw a precursor to the Left Behind movies. Do you remember those Rapture films? Where they closed out with like a guillotine? That's my first impression of APU right there. To senior preview weekends, right? Where you're starting to get embedded in the culture of APU and spend the night here hanging out with different folks from across the country, all trying to navigate life out and figure out what's going on, and hearing phrases like MK for the first time. All right, I knew about PK, I don't know about MK, right? So again, meeting my wife, and then eventually teaching here. I taught courses in the seminary. I've taught courses in the Department of Global Studies. I've taught courses in first-year seminar. I've also hosted a conference with Urban Youth Workers Institute, where I worked there for 3 years. I've also convened meetings here with ministry leaders across the country. So yeah, APU definitely has a special place in my heart. See, when I grew up in La Fuente, 20 minutes from here, in a Mexican-American home, Mexican-American community, education was really valued at a different level than other folks. So as in the San Gabriel Valley, even though I was in a school that was like 90% Mexican-American, I was the only Latino in the GATE honors classes, the only Latino male in those classes from like elementary school to my senior year of high school. So who were my best friends? What they do now, Filipino-American airline pilot, first generation. Vietnamese American surgeon with a PhD and MD, first generation. Chinese American mathematician, first generation. So in a sense, I grew up in two worlds at the same time. I grew up in this ethnic community, playing soccer, captain of the soccer team, most of the kids there multiple years, Spanish speaking. On the other hand, I'm with these advanced folks that got tiger moms and are talking about Ivy League dreams. And when my brother ended up choosing to come here, I should state that I think my family did help build West Campus. My wife has 2 degrees and me and my 2 brothers have degrees as well. And when my brother came here, I was like, whoa, Christian place. Why am I going to a Christian school? Because of what I experienced in my high school. My high school school is not a safe place. My high school, first time I heard about it, I was 10 years old. And again, La Puente is similar to Azusa, it's similar to El Monte, it's similar to Victorville, it's similar to so many of these cities that we drive through all the time. The first time I heard about it, I was 10 years old. My best friend in 4th grade asked me if I wanted to go to a funeral. I said, well, who died, Grandma and Grandpa? He said, my older brother got shot in the head outside the gates of the high school. And the way he said it was the most chilling way. It was like, that's what happens to our older brothers when they grow up. They join gangs and get murdered. And I was like, that's no way, because I came up in the church. Right? So I was in the community, but I wasn't in the community. Meaning, I was the one that was in storefront Latino Pentecostal churches like everyone. I'm the one that didn't watch The Simpsons growing up, because we had TBN on 24/7 in the home. So my parents were doing like the best that they could with what they got. Gave them sports, put them in this environment where there's a lot of like biblical influence, and hopefully we'll avoid the dangers that a lot of my friends were experiencing, right? So just coming up again from the LA Times and type in Nogales High School where I went, you'll see all these stories there. You'll see a story of someone getting shot on the baseball field at Tuesday at 10 a.m. And when you play Little League Baseball, probably not many things scarier than hearing that. Or if you rode the bus and you hear the school bus get shot up leaving high school, I don't know how you really even make sense of a life like that, right? Or even on the weekends, on a Sunday, the security officer was just patrolling the school, he got shot. So I remember begging my parents, please send me to the Catholic school, please send me to Bishop on the other side of La Puente. And they said it's too expensive. We got 2 more kids. You go in here. Okay. So I ended up going to my high school. It's my sophomore year. Ended up having a teacher I really bonded with. Went to Calvary Chapel, Golden Springs, in Diamond Bar with Raul Reese. And it was just one day my sophomore year, I was running late to class. He happened to be absent that day. And I was headed to his class and walking, I hear a loud noise hit the football on the floor. Like a loud metallic rumble through the school, and I'm going, what the heck was that? So what I did growing up, where I grew up in the night, was I ran to the noise to see if one of my friends got hurt. That's what we did, right? So I'm running, and I turn the corner, and immediately outside of my classroom, on the floor, I see my classmate with his hand blown up. And shrapnel in the face and chest of 2 other students because they pipe bombed his exploded. This is probably the most traumatic thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm talking about an era before grief counselors. I'm talking about an era before PTSD talk. So when that happened, we ended up getting shuttled to the football field. Well, every major news station in LA's helicopter flew over the school, and bomb sniffy dogs went through the campus. And when I got to the football field, I saw something I'd never seen before. I saw completely student-led worship. I saw kids crying out and hugging and embracing each other like it was a scene out of 9/11. Wow. And I got moved. I got convicted. Because I thought, why didn't we do this for so-and-so's little brother that got shot at? Talk about race, right? I know that some folks were saying, when Charlottesville went down, and folks were like TV torches and all this stuff, that now you have to go to church and speak about race, right? We're all on Facebook or Twitter, so we all hear this stuff, right? And the thing I thought was, well, if you didn't speak out against Charleston, well, folks are getting murdered in church, you might not speak about, with Charlottesville or Charleston, like it doesn't add up, but for me, it was just one of those jarring moments where you would think if you've seen people get murdered in front of you, shot and stabbed, that would draw you to something. Oftentimes you get so desensitized, right? Or you just kind of like check out because like you don't want to think about that. But when this engaged, I got convicted and I went and held hands and prayed with folks on our football field. And I heard those 7 words that had been spoken from the beginning of time. What are you going to do about this? And instantly when that happened, like God pressed on my heart, I thought, excuses, right? It's always been like this. My older brother came here, my cousin came here. Then I reflected, my younger brother, younger come here one day. I must do something. I don't know what I'm going to do, I'm going to do something. So I go home. Now, mind you, school did not get canceled the next day. Okay, keep that in mind. Also keep in mind as a word of context that I heard about what happened in Newtown, right? Lil Precious, elementary school students, first graders, Some took 4 and 5 shots at close range, unrecognizable by their parents. That school got knocked down. Hashtag White Lives Matter. There's plenty of schools like mine in LA and driving distance of where we're at, where that would never even be considered because we probably wouldn't have a lot of these schools anymore. And let's not even talk about what's going on in Chicago. So when I go home now, and I'm stressed out, and I'm seeing these images, and to this day I can still smell what that smelled like, of the blood and the burnt metal and all that. I had a cassette tape from one of my pastors. We were teaching tape ministry back in the day. Had one of my favorite sermons. I said, let me listen to this. And I had to anesthetize myself, right? So I listened to it, I listened to it again, I listened to it again, and then I reflected. I have pulled all-nighters, and God bless science teachers for chemistry exams. I've worked hours and hours on English paper. But I've ever studied the Word of God on my own, really. Now, mind you, that's not to say I've been in church for the last 7 hours long. But I'm saying, did I ever take my direct context to God and say, what am I supposed to do about this? First-hand revelation. I listened to that talk probably 17 times that night. Came back the next day, started preaching the gospel. That was Halloween 1995. I was 15 years old. We did a lot of crazy stuff in my high school. We were kept friend gang members in time, and they were not allowed to recruit our little brothers anymore. I don't think you could fully realize what that means, but maybe if I was to drop you off in Iraq and talk to some ISIS folks, and maybe say, you can't recruit. But just go into my world, that's the moral courage that I've been operating off of since 15. Not because that's what I wanted to do, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I honestly looked at the society and the neighborhood I was in and said, not for my younger brother and sister. And you know what the response I got from that, from some gang member? I don't know what you think you're doing here, but if that's what Christianity is, then maybe what my mom and grandma have been telling me all my life is true. And why didn't somebody do that for me? So when we're talking about racial conciliation, I think we need to change the lens and really think about what is it that we've been comfortable enough to do, and were we willing to risk something, right? Now, I'm going to be really pointed now. I know exactly what a Christian is. Okay? That's a disciple of Christ that symbolically, through baptism, you go down the old life, you come up, new life. Totally living for God, following the teachings of God. Submitting yourself. We've heard lines like this all our lives. We must decrease, He must increase, right? For me to die, God's to live. I have no idea what a Christian institution is. I have no idea what that is. Because a Christian institution appears as though it's here to perpetuate itself. If you operate in a world where you're trying to perpetuate yourself, you oftentimes play things safe. Try to live in a way where you hold your marriage, your family, your calling, your life, and say, no, I got this, I'll figure it out. No, it's hands wide open. And for me, from being at places like APU, what I sensed is oftentimes there's a talk, right? There's a rhetoric, but then in the practice, it doesn't seem as though it's tangible enough. And I'll get as specific as anybody wants and name as many names as you want. But I think we all know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And one point I would illustrate would be that my wife and my brother were in the multi-ethnic leaders program. And there was direct calls for more of a diversification of background. And from students I talk to now, there's still that call. And we can talk a lot about what diversity or decolonization talks about, but basically what I'm getting at is there is something to be said about folks that are not user-friendly that we bring in, prophetic. So I'm not saying we just import in to the university folks because they're a certain demographic. I'm talking about tangibly our ability to put their careers on the line to advocate for students or not. And the difficult thing is, right, when we do get success in our careers, we oftentimes will look at the bank statement and the mortgage and the kids, and we start to question, like, I think this is right, I think this is what I know to do, but then we start to throw in the caveats, right? And because we do things at a certain level, we never get the chance to engage, right? So I was speaking in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and I spoke to a student there, and she was at the Kennedy School of Government, getting her master's, and she was talking about some institutional things that were going on the campus. And she mentioned that one of her classmates met with an administrator, and the administrator said, well, if you want things to change, you need to start doing advocacy for it. You need to start making a stand for that. And the response from the student was, I'm paying tens of thousands of dollars, why don't you guys just do the right thing? And this was the student, I was talking to the student, this is their friend, and they were conveying this. And she said, like, I just want to get through, and then I'll deal with it later, right? So my response was, in your character, if you do not have a history of doing things as a student, why are you going to do it when you're early professional and you're trying to make it? And then why are you going to do it? Like, I don't think the gauge of what we're talking about here is measured enough in terms of like integrity, character, and who we really are, right? So I don't know how much of that stuff shows up. We're talking about institutionally within job interviews, right? When's the last time you risked your career advocating for students? I mean, heck, we are in a Christian school. Is anybody get surprised when the truth is told at that level? Or questions are asked at that level? Or is it kind of placated, right? And just to go ahead and like touch on this topic, and I'll get more into it, but racial conciliation here, the reason that phrase is used is because Mark Charles, a Native American activist and author, would say, we can't do racial reconciliation because reconciliation assumes that we're on good terms at one point. In America, some of our groups were never on good terms, right? From the first Native Americans experiencing genocide to African Americans being sold off to the own land we're in right now, Mexico. And I know that oftentimes we'll look back and say, make excuses for folks like George Washington, all these figures, right? We make excuses like, well, they didn't know that they were in a quote-unquote patriarchal such and such society and all that. At the time of the Mexican-American War, Abraham Lincoln said it was an unjust war. At the time, Teddy Roosevelt said, we raped Mexico. We saw what we wanted and took it. So it's very interesting how when we even have conversations by presidential candidates, and they talk about immigration like it started 30 years ago. I mean, I remember I asked Karina when I first met her, we were hanging out on campus, I said, what part of Mexico are you from? That's a common question when you're dating someone that's Mexican. What part of Mexico? You said Texas. I said, come on now. So dad, I saw dad, I said, what part of Mexico? You know, Texas. Grandpa was alive. Great-grandpa was alive just for a little bit. Texas. How do you do illegal immigration in a land that got stolen? And you want to talk further now. sibling relationship to Mexico and America? How, I mean, let's be blunt, California's awesome. How do you amputate your brother's leg, take the best part of the land, basically have a gun to their head and say, you know, we have troops in Mexico City, we took down the Mexico flag, we put the American flag up. And Canada did that too. We don't even like Canada, some of us in here, right? We did that. We took their flag down in Mexico City, took over the country and said, if you don't give us those states up north, we're taking the whole thing. How, in that relationship, is it viewed as though we got a higher moral ground on how we're a nation of laws? That's what I don't understand. As someone that's Mexican American that's in this country, and to hear many Christian folks talk about immigration in a certain language, it makes me go, are we have amnesia or are we history conscious? Also, we caught that collective together where all of a sudden, don't talk about anything that happened 30 years ago. Okay, well, where does this logic begin and end? Because if a family came here seeking a better life, like Jesus' family did, and they have a kid here, and then you say, no, you need to go through the process and get in line. Well, let's go through the process and start getting some stakes back. I think, honestly, if we're not the best minds, or we're not challenging with our hearts to discuss these topics in realistic ways, oftentimes the students that we end up influencing, it doesn't translate out, right? So on the one hand, you can have students and in an institution that states certain things, like we do thousands of hours of community service every year, but then we don't think, what's the quality of that service to those communities, right? And if we're moving forward down that route, one of the things that communities didn't point out is there's folks in those gatherings that I had in my home that I've been investing with since I was 15 years old. I'm 38 now. We're trying to show the students, look, we're part of a lineage. We're investing back, and everything we do is dependent upon our proteges and our students. And I cannot give any student advice to be morally courageous if I'm not operating in moral courage, and if I'm not connected to them. Because the second I become detached to that community, then all of a sudden I get comfortable and don't feel like I need to advocate for them anymore. Which, for the record, now, when I wrote this article, I didn't need to do that. I'm the first professor of mentorship in the United States. I can talk about youth mentoring all day long and get paid really a lot. And have people go, hey, look, Gabe, he is a poster boy for being educated and from the community, and at 27 he got his doctorate from USC, and that's good. But you know what? I saw things happen so much over the years at places like APU that I thought, I gotta put myself out there and put this thing in publishing. And again, just as I have reflected on this topic, when this journal approached me and asked me to write this topic, and it was dedicated to John Perkins, again, I was starting to realize there's different lineages that we're a part of. I'm gonna go there now. I'm going in now. There's lineages of folks right now that are quoting Martin Luther King. We're never for Martin Luther King. When you look at the March on Washington, and you see that's not even the full name, it's like the March on Washington for Jobs and Economics, and you see what's listed in there, that would be deemed liberal, socialist, communist. Okay? And even now, when we bring up certain topics around immigration or Black Lives Matter, the same vitriol that got MLK murdered is articulated on campuses like APU. And it really has to get you to reflect. I think some people should be banned from using Martin Luther King's name. Right?
Thank you.
They don't get a pass. And in fact, don't want to be the person to make people feel uncomfortable. But for me, I just reflect, unless you're honoring his legacy and falling in line with the lineage and advocating for people of color, you can't just use those words. That's right. In fact, if we're going to talk about Christian institution now, if one of our main things that we're concerned about is economic viability, then we have to think through the concept of economic discipleship. Economic discipleship operates in a way where Jesus would say, you can only serve one master, you will either love one and not the other. Now I know capitalism is the system we operate in, but when Gordon Gekko and Wall Street said greed is good, we have a president that's embodying that. Whether it's the way he treats females, the way he operates business, that's a fact. So for me, as I am looking at the lens of Jesus outlining the role that money plays in our lives, I would take out a metaphor from two different people. One, the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler thought he was on point, and Jesus called out what was his idol. Give away everything you have, follow. That story says you rich young ruler left sad. Now, let me ask you this. What's the value of gaining 11 brothers? What's the value of walking with Jesus and doing ministry with him? Now I'm going to ask what the purpose of wealth is. The purpose of wealth is financial security, your bills are paid for, maybe you can throw some nice parties and get friends, maybe you can cover things. The original ruler operated off of a deficiency model. He thought you could outgive God. And because of that, he left. Now, when I'm talking about institutions, I'm not just talking about faculty, staff, students. I'm talking about board of trustees, donors, and executives. In the questioning, do we ask, have you ever risked your career for people of color? So I just want to clarify, is the main goal, when your screening processes happen, and these search committees are created, are the main goals we're getting the most qualified person with the incredible, impeccable resumes and visas, and folks that maybe we're going to gauge wisdom, equaling financial wealth? Is that what we operate on? Because if that's what we're operating on, I would say that's what I don't get about Christian institutions. Because we're supposed to operate different than the other folks. And when we don't, then we create a culture that we walk in. And when we wonder when our students, a racial incident happens on campus, or something occurs, we want to deem it as, oh, that's out of the ordinary, rather than say, no, that's the fruit of our spirit that we're operating in the spirit of Antichrist. So then another person I was going to on economic discipleship now would be Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus really can't even get access to Jesus, right? He's up in the tree looking down. And Jesus approaches Zacchaeus. Right? Now remember before, it was really the rich ruler approaching Jesus. So Jesus approaches Zacchaeus, and people knew who that guy was. And they knew who the tax collector was. And Jesus said, I'm a meal with you. And Zacchaeus is so enthralled by the grace, by the generosity and the hospitality that he proclaims, for anyone I've done wrong to, I'm going to give back to. That's restitution. He realized, hey, I don't have to operate off this mindset where I'm taking. When I give, I get more. And what it oftentimes appears is when we do talk about diversity initiatives, that it's really the bare minimum. Unheard of to think at APU in Los Angeles, one of the most diverse cities in the world, to put a goal of we are going to have a Mexican American Studies program that rivals UCLA. Unheard of. Travesty, actually. To be considered, I think we're considered an HSI, right?
Yes.
To be considered an HSI and to not offer strong ethnic, Latin American, Latinx programs for those students. That's not generosity. So I'm just gonna just put it out there. I'm saying stuff that a lot of folks have told me behind the scenes for years, but probably would never get a platform like I'm getting right now. And if they did, would be afraid I'm never getting invited back. And I keep tabs on all that for the record too. Whenever I'm like really honest, I keep tabs, do I get invited back? Does that mean something? Because when you do not embrace emerging leaders who are prophetic ethnic minority voices, you then lose folks that can contextualize to the next generation of students. And when you don't contextualize to the next generation of students, you then by default lose another generation of youth because they're experiencing the same blasé, surface level service that's not involved with the moral courage that I spoke about earlier of what I did in high school. See, in this journal article, and I'll email it to anybody that wants it, I actually addressed a letter that the current president of Fuller Seminary and the past president of Fuller Seminary offered. Now, mind you, I taught there for 8 years, master's there, my wife has a doctorate here. So, this may not have been the best thing to put in print, but I will say I had these conversations with the president one-on-one behind the scenes and nothing happened. They put out a joint article after the Trump election and stated for any in which ways that Fuller Seminary contributed to the current state of affairs in America, we apologize. And on the campus, in an academic conference, with the president present, I said that apology is unacceptable. I said you cannot apologize for something if you don't state specifically what you did and specifically what you'll change. And what I'm saying is, when I can point out how many go on and number off the top of my head. At least 5 folks that worked at APU, they had to leave APU because they were deemed too liberal. And because they decided to not muzzle their voices, they were not embraced by this community. And despite the fact that students appreciated who they were, there were other students that were connected to board members and donors that started contacting folks and making life for my friend's help. That happened on our watch. And I don't know if we've ever did a lament for that. What do you do when God preps and sends you folks, but you don't accept them because they're deemed troublemakers or whistleblowers? I'll say it. You guys say that you embraced Moses, embraced the prophets, and how I would want to embrace you like a mother bird embraced their chicks, but you killed those prophets, and you weren't friends with Jesus either. And we have the gall to oftentimes affirm MLK, but I'm talking about from the tangible Mexican-American, African-American student experience here at APU. They are not seeing the rhetoric match up with the words, and it's breaking their hearts. And there are folks like me that were here that would have dropped out or switched to USC, but heck, I'm like a first-generation college student. I'm going to be trying to figure this place out. So I know there's things wrong, and I'm articulating the same exact thing of what the girl in Harvard was saying, of why should I have to advocate? Why aren't you guys spiritually mature enough to listen to what God is telling you? See, the thing is that I'm not going to allow any academic forum to placate who I feel like God has called me to be. So because of that, when we have places like APU where we can openly discuss Native American genocide, African American slavery, stuff that's happened with Mexican Americans over the years, and you've never seen a teacher ever become emotional, that does something. So when we walk into the classroom, it's just the facts. And what we're doing with students is we're detaching the heart from the brain, making them robots, desensitizing them, not knowing about what's really going on across the street in Azusa and the realities of life, and not taking that serious enough. God's heart for Azusa is tremendous, but it doesn't seem as though our actions match. And I think that again, that if we don't go ahead and wrestle through this, we're falling in line with a certain tradition. See, something interesting happened in the church in 380, right? We know Constantine came to power, and all these pagan temples transferred over to Christian churches, and we saw a lot of things that we had never seen before in the church, because Constantine in his world was thinking, we need to make this Christianity more palatable, right, to the culture that we're in. So just as today we may incorporate stuff like PowerPoint or guitars or keyboards, they incorporated in the vestments, that wasn't in the church before, choir, processional, right? So it was kind of like making some like majestic type experience from churches that were really born out of house churches and homes, right? We also as ministers got for the first time tax exempt status. And you had wrestling matches within the church of leaders saying, hey, we don't agree with all these changes that are coming in. It seems like Constantine's advocating more for unity. We want the purity side. And other folks were like, hey, we got a good thing going here. We're not getting murdered no more. We're on payroll. We're really going to grow, right? So then when you go ahead and expand further, past Constantine and the Roman Catholic Church, we had a papal bull done, and in this is known as the Doctrine of Discovery emerged, where Portugal basically got carte blanche that if they showed up into another country and they didn't feel like it was being used right, you discovered it, you owned it, right? And at the same time now, mind you, of Christopher Columbus was the same time Martin Luther. These things are very closely tied together. Same time as John Calvin, we had conquistadors, right? And you go on down, and what a lot of people don't realize is, in these new lands that were discovered, there was no separation of church and state. So at this point, you got the Catholic Church in Germany collecting forced tithes. If you lived there, you were tithing to the church. So you have entire denominations building their wealth off of legalized stealing. Then in America, in the colonies, if you lived in this colony and it was Congregationalist, you were getting forced tithe there. And you on this one, Roman Catholic, you're forced tithe there. So in New Hampshire, what ended up happening was, in New Hampshire, what ended up happening during this era was that a Baptist minister spoke up and said, hey, I don't think this is right that we're having to pay for other people's clergy. And that's where the beginning of separation of church-state happened for the first time in history, really. And Thomas Jefferson and Madison ended up seeing that, and within the Bill of Rights, they ended up changing it so that there would be a separation of church and state, no more forced tithes. And there was debates within our ministry circles of people saying, our churches are going to die now. We're not supported by the government anymore. And what ended up happening, and this is Isaac Buckus, the Baptist minister I mentioned, what ended up happening was we went from a donor-driven church, which was political, to a donor-driven church that was private donors. Think about this now. Talking about Zacchaeus now, the tax collector, the one that took stuff that was not his. The church has operated in the role of tax collector for centuries. That's why when you drive into places like Los Angeles or Pasadena, and you see like storefront church, smaller church, and then well, this church is $100 million with a $30 million endowment. Where'd that money come from? That's some old Europe money still. But I've never heard the topic of restitution brought up about that. Further, in America now, the nonprofits, the universities, who've been the primary donors of those institutions? And where did their wealth come from? And whose backs did it happen on? See, I'm not asking a question of is it a sin to be rich. I am asking a specific question of how did folks acquire wealth that are the donors of our institutions, and how do our institutions acquire wealth? And when we get into asking those types of difficult questions, then I think we're really on the forefront of delving into these things. Because again, do we have the courage to talk about immigration from a biblical perspective, truly? Do we have the courage to talk about what land Azusa Pacific really sits on? And I want to just state now, I am not talking about diversity for the sake of diversity now. I'm talking about decolonization. And I'm talking about, do we truly do the bare minimum? Or do we do things that may potentially upset donors? I don't know if anyone's following what's gone on at Moody lately. They're right in the midst of some of this same conversation. The issues that are being faced at APU are being faced in evangelicalism wide. And there is a breaking point that begins to happen in each of our hearts, where we say, I'm all in. And when I did that talk, I went back at Fuller Seminary, and as I closed it, I had a lot of people come up to me after. I'll never forget this. This one African American student came up to me, and he said, I've been attending this seminary for the past year, and the white supremacy at Fuller Seminary is so deep that I've not been following Jesus. But after your talk, I want to follow Christ again.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, so people are so surprised when the truth is spoken in the seminary. Or people are getting saved when you confront bullying. See, I'm operating off a framework of the same courage that was exhibited when we were confronting gang members and saying you can't do this to our younger siblings is the same thing that's happening right now. It's telling bullies, you can't run that way, and I know that you're saying you have faith, and I know that you're saying that you want to embrace our students, but if you are more afraid of a donor than of God, if you're more afraid of certain conservative faculty members than of God, then maybe you don't need to work at a Christian institution. Maybe we need to really be explicit now and say, unless you are willing to put your career on the lines for students that have been historically oppressed, maybe this is not the place for you, because the Jesus that I'm trying to follow operated in that world. I think that's enough.